Good afternoon and welcome to our live stream today, coming to you from the offices of the National, where we're going to be discussing the SNP's position on the minimum age for military recruitment, which is currently at 16, and the SNP Youth are currently trying to have that changed up to 18. So joining me to have that discussion is Caelan, who is the convener of the Mid-Scotland and Fife sort of region of the SNP Youth, as well as Rory, who is the vice convener of National SNP Youth. So I guess for anyone who's tuning in who doesn't necessarily know the current setup, the SNP Youth is a separate entity from the SNP itself with different policies.
Yeah, we're a sort of quasi-independent organisation. In the past we were Young Scots for Independence when the SNP was the only party in favour of independence, but we're since SNP Youth, Young Scots for Independence. So we do develop our own policy, have our own stances, and it's a big part of what we do is actually discussing policy internally and giving young people a voice. We are Scotland's largest youth movement, and obviously after the referendum we've become energised with politics, and that's kind of what we aim to do.
Yeah, and so this is the kind of thing where you're almost like trying to push the SNP in different directions at different times of the policies that the youth members are wanting to lead on.
So when we come up with our own policy ideas and motions and things, once we've made them SNP Youth policy, we then push to bring it to national conference, and that's what we're doing with this motion, to try and convey our ideas and kind of show that we are a voice to be heard by the actual party and get things in place that we're pushing for rather than just listening.
And this isn't a new thing for the SNP Youth either. I mean, you recently had success with kind of getting the tie campaigns of objectives brought into being part of the SNP's main policy. That's right.
Yeah, we worked quite a lot with the two organisers for the tie campaign, and as a result of that, the Scottish Government is now forming a working group off the back of that campaign to make it a reality.
Okay, so the SNP Youth, you have your own kind of like agenda, and a lot of that is pushing the SNP in directions that you want to kind of go see. So this issue of military age recruitment, it's currently at 16 and you want it brought up to 18. I mean, what's the sort of impetus for doing that?
Well, it's quite a multifaceted issue. I could speak to you about it for hours. So there's a range of issues about it. One is international standards. The UK is one of the few countries in the world to actually recruit at 16. In fact, the process to join can start at 15 years and 7 months. We want to bring UK standards for recruitment in line with human rights. So under the Geneva Convention, you can be a legitimate military target as long as you're facilitating the armed forces. So regardless of what age you are, if you're wearing a uniform or you're assisting, whether you're a chef for example, you can technically be killed in combat even if you don't serve in the front line.
And if you do want to get this sort of brought forward in this change, what is it that needs to happen next?
So we've written the motion and passed it at our SNP national conference, and we put it forward to National Council, where it was remitted back, and we rewrote the motion, and now we're putting it back forward to go to SOAC, so Standing Orders Committee of the party, to get it. Well, if it passes that, then it goes to National Conference, and we speak and have a debate, and then if it goes through, it becomes policy of the National Party.
Okay, so you're trying to push this through at the moment and have this become policy. I mean, are you finding that there's resistance within the party?
I think there's a wee bit of, not so much resistance. I think most of the people who remitted back, they believed in the principle of the motion. They agreed with a lot of the points that we raised and were included in the motion. The only difference was that what the actual end objective of it was going to be. So for us, our initial policy was a complete ban on under 18s joining the armed forces in any role. We've since met with the defence team of the SNP to talk about it and review the motion. We've also spoken to current members of the armed forces who are in the SNP and also veterans to review it and try and come to an agreed compromise. So the compromise that we are bringing back, which was at the request of the membership of the party, was that a ban on under 18s joining roles which requires combat trainings, because there would be an expectation there, or even a potential expectation for those people to participate in armed combat, which is against international human rights. International human rights is an issue that the SNP has always led on, especially for young people. So we think right now, especially when the Scottish Government and indeed the party as a whole are re-energising our efforts, I think it's one of those issues that we absolutely need to take up the gauntlet on.
So, sir, if I understand right, then you're saying that this is not so much that people can't go into the military at the age of 16; they just can't see combat until 18.
Well, no, they don't actually serve on the front line until they're 18. However, there is still the potential for them to be a target and to be involved in conflict, and that wouldn't be illegal. That it wouldn't be unimaginable either. So
yeah, so because right now, no matter what you join up, if you join up to do an apprenticeship or the infantry, you're given weapons training. So we're saying for as long as that's the case, then if you're saying as soon as you join the military, you should be trained in weaponry, then the age should be raised to 18 because of the things we're seeing coming out of it for young people. That's issues like mental health, and they're far more likely to end up with conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder, or they're most likely to end up unemployed. And it's just, there's so many more issues than there are benefits of young people joining up to the military, to the point where our position on this motion has come about because it just is completely nonsensical to put these young people in these positions.
Because that's one of the criticisms of raising the age, specifically usually from people within the military, is that by raising the age you're going to take away an opportunity for people to have access to certain skills or experiences. I mean, are you almost looking to find other ways to make up that shortfall, or do you think it even exists?
I think the Scottish Government have already identified that. If you actually look at the MOD have admitted themselves in their own documents that they are targeting people who are academically disengaged. That's the term that they use. So essentially, working class young people, particularly young men who weren't particularly enthused about school or academia, they're going after those people. And they've also admitted that they're using under 18 recruits to make up for the adult shortfall in the infantry, which is the most dangerous role. It's got a much higher chance of death, of injury, of PTSD. It's because you're a frontline soldier, that's what the infantry is, and the largest role that under 18 recruits go into is in fact the infantry. In fact, something about 90% of the roles that under 18s go into are combat roles.
So coming back to talking about this compromise in terms of what the policy is actually going to be, I suppose in what ways does this compromise sort of, I guess, what's the difference between what you want this policy to be compared to what you're actually bringing forward to conference?
Well, our stance is still in favour of a complete ban for under 18s. However, that's not how democracy works. So we want to be able to affect young people's life for the better. So we've agreed to make this compromise, and also at the request of the membership. So the difference would be that if, for example, if you join to be a chef, in the current situation, you are given combat training because the saying is like you're a soldier first. So if things go wrong in the field or whatever, you will be expected to basically pick up a rifle and fight. So what we are saying is, well, you can join at 16 to be a chef, which is a non-combat role, but then if you wouldn't get your combat training until 18. And a big reason for that is because 16 and 17, although you can vote, we firmly believe in the right to vote at 16. A lot of people have said that it's contradictory, we don't think it is. But 16 and 17 is a formative year. It's one of those grey area years where you start to begin to get these rights, so like buying alcohol, driving, that sort of thing. So we don't view it as black and white. We don't take an ideological stance on it that 16 you can do everything, or 18 you can do everything. Each issue has to be assessed on its own merits.
I mean, looking at other places around Europe, which we were talking about earlier on, and how the UK is actually sort of behind other places in Europe. I mean, do they have an outright ban, or do they approach it the same way of you can join at 16 but no military position until 18?
Right now we are the only European and the only NATO country to recruit at 16, and we're one of, I think, 19 in the entire world that recruit at 16. So this is probably, the SNP, we pride ourselves on, like Rory was saying, like leading the way on issues in equality and on human rights. And if we were to get this motion passed at conference, it would mean that we upkeep this standard, because this is something so crucial. It's international law. It's under the UN and human rights legislation, technically we are recruiting child soldiers. And so if we were to pass this, we'd be like upkeeping our standard of leading the way in human rights.
I think as well, if you look at the stances of other parties, the Lib Dems, the Greens, Labour, Plaid Cymru, they all either support a full ban or a partial ban, or at least a review of the current age of recruitment. The only party that currently supports recruiting at 16 is the Tories. If we don't take a stance on this, we will essentially be siding with the Tories. The current SNP policy is that it's passive. There hasn't actually been any real decision made about this policy. So although it was remitted back, it's sort of in flux and it's in discussion. So if we don't do something about this, we will essentially be in a position where every other party is taking a stance to review this and taking action on this integral issue for young people and human rights across the world, and we will be siding with the Tories on it.
And do you see active resistance? I mean, if it's been passive so far, do you see that there being active resistance to bringing this forward to conference, or do you think this is the kind of thing that the SNP will naturally get behind?
I don't think there's like proper resistance, but I think it is something that I think is really good, even just to bring this to conference, to start the discussion on it and to start the debate, because it is something that I feel at some point in time, like, the whole SNP will support. But for now, we'd have to have this conversation and kind of iron out the details to get everybody on side. But I mean, it is YSI policy, so it's a substantial amount of the members that do already agree with it, and we've been working so hard. We have so many branches support and so many, particularly MSPs support, and so it is something that's growing and growing to the point where we'll have to make a decision.
And the next step ultimately is getting it accepted for conference, and you're saying this is coming up in the next couple of days, this deadline to have this policy be accepted. Are you kind of looking to build support in MSPs and MPs at the moment for it?
Absolutely, that's the complete aim at the moment. The deadline is the 28th of July for elected members and branches to submit motions for SOAC. So most branches have already had their meetings already, so we're basically making a big appeal to the MSPs and the MPs of the party. We've written to them all already, and we want them to submit the motion with us. We've already got a number of branches, it's in double figures. We've already got a number of MSPs, as we've said, and we want to add more to that list. There's massive support just outside of the party as well. 77% of people in the UK agree with raising it to 18, and it's slightly higher, it's 78% in Scotland. So there's massive public support for this. There is a small bit of, not so much resistance, but a difference of opinion. Like I said, people agree with the principle of it, but it's just nuanced differences here and there. But we think that we've reached this compromise, it's a fair compromise, and it is going to make a big difference for people's lives.
And speaking of the SNP Youth in general, I mean, we talked about the Thai campaign earlier on. Following on from the sort of success of the Thai campaign and having that brought into SNP policy, if you can also succeed in having this brought into being main SNP policy, I mean, do you think that the SNP Youth is starting to define itself as quite, I guess, a strong force within the SNP itself, has been able to sort of like push policy that it sees as important?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, after the referendum, so many young people and people in general in Scotland became energised and engaged in politics, and what we've tried to do since our relaunch after the referendum was to become this policy machine, essentially, because we're quite unique in that we've now, because we have so many elected representatives and people have been so involved, that we not only have opinions, we not only have well-informed opinions, we also have the skills to actually push them. We have an understanding of the system and how to use it to achieve these aims. So we don't want to be, some little youth wing where people can ruffle their hair and go, oh, aren't the youth wing great? We actually want to be a serious political lobbying organisation, and so far we've done that. We've done it not just within the SNP, we've met with other members of other parties, elected members, and we don't want to be partisan, we want to find the common ground on issues where we can make a difference for the young people of Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, we have shown we will take our own initiative and we'll lead the way rather than just listening to whatever the party are telling us to support. We are the ones actually coming up with the policy, like Roy says, being a policy machine and actually like having our own ideas and making it more progressive, because we are the ones growing up in today's society, or the ones having to find our place in society, and to have this real life experience gives us this, like, the platform to be that bit more informed about real life and to push the party in the direction that we know will benefit the majority.
Great. So you're saying this deadline's a couple of days. For anyone who's watching who is an SNP member or listening who's an SNP member, I mean, what can they do to sort of like help secure this if it's something that they agree with?
Write to their local MP or MSP or who is an SNP, their branch SNP elected representative. Get them to support it, get them to submit the motion, go public with their support.
Social media is a big driver.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a great tool for us in pursuing our aims. We basically just we know there's a lot of people who support it, elected representatives and members. Even just an ordinary member putting out a post saying, I support this policy, please support it as well. just getting the momentum going, and we just need people who say they support it to actually come out publicly and say they support it and throw their weight behind it, because it's the only way we're actually going to achieve any change within our party and within Scotland.
And Keelan, do you think that this is going to pass? Like, if it gets through, do you think it's going to get the support it needs to not only get to conference but then pass at conference?
I definitely think there's hope for it passing. I mean, we have, like we're saying, like it is YSI policy, so we will all the young representatives that are going to conference will be voting in favour, because this policy is so important to us and we discuss it so much, and everybody has such a firm standpoint on it, and will be so many people putting in cards to speak for it, that I think, and we have so many like MSPs and some MPs on side, that will have so many people speaking for it. I think it will be difficult to find proper opposition to it, so I do definitely think it's looking optimistic for us.
Great. Well, thank you both for coming in and having a chat with me today about that policy. Obviously, we'll be kind of keeping an eye on it as it goes forward as well with the National. So if you do want to keep up to the date with that, please do stick with the National as well. But thank you both for coming in, and thank you very much for everyone who tuned in and listened and watched today as well.